Hello everyone. I would like to welcome everybody to the high-level roundtable on human-centric digital government. We are convening, as you know, today under the dynamic theme of how to manage the trade-offs and deliver interoperable, user-centric and private by design public services. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chris Amita and I'm Associate Director at the Lisbon Council, and I will be your host for this meeting today. So the timing of this roundtable couldn't be more right. While the European Union is striving to achieve a harmonious digital single market, European citizens and businesses do not yet have widespread access to cross-border digital public services. Only 43% of critical public services can be accessed online across the European Union, against 81% of national digital services. So, of course, in response, the European Commission has taken action and is proposing regulations such as the digital EID wallet, about which we will be discussing a little bit later, and making also funding available to enable cross-border service delivery, namely through the Recovery and Resilience Facility that devotes 47 billion euros to digital public services. However, the burning questions still remain. How can we make these initiatives a success? And how can we spend this money well and in the benefit of all our citizens? To answer these questions, this roundtable brings together 5 EU-funded projects involving 51 partners from 18 different countries. We have speakers with us today from all 5 projects who will share the lessons they have learned from piloting interoperable, user-centric and secure cross-border solutions. For your information, the session will run for 90 minutes, and we are also on the record. The discussion is structured around 3 main themes and 3 main sessions. Session 1 will focus on the digital identity wallet, session 2 on co-creation for data sovereignty, and session 3 on co-production of sustainable public services. After session 1, we'll open the floor for questions, and we'll do that also once more at the end of the sessions. If you have questions, please type them in the chat room, and then we'll make sure to unmute you, give you the floor to ask the question yourself. But before we dive into those sessions, we'll hear first from our keynote speaker, Roberta Coco, and we'll also, Nathan Carvalho will also give a presentation of new research by the Across project. So with that, please allow me to give the floor and to introduce Roberta Coco. Roberta Coco is the co-chair of the Advisory Committee to the Minister for Technological Innovation and Digital Transition in Italy. And she's also the former deputy mayor of Milan, where she led the city's very successful digital transformation agenda. So Roberta, we very much look forward to hearing what you have to say. We know that citizen data rights is a topic very close to your heart. So the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Mita. And first of all, let me thank the Lisbon Council for this invitation. I'm honored to be here to share my comments and thoughts about data and how interoperability might be, should be, must be an enabler for developing services to citizens. If you invited me to have a solution, I do not have any solution. I have some experiences, some positive experiences, some negative experiences. So I want to share with you some comments about these key topics. In my opinion, this is the key, the most important topic that public sector should consider and debate nowadays. A few words about me, very shortly. 25 years in Microsoft around the world, so deeply involved in the technological and innovation waves. As Mita said, 5 years as a deputy mayor of digital transformation with the mayor of Milan, not from a political point, but from a technical point. But my role was to be deputy mayor. And I have been working for the last 6 months with the Minister of Innovation in Italy, especially focusing on the new project that can offer immediate and easy services to citizens based on technology, especially based on interoperability and a specific role on digital skills, because we can't boost digital services to citizens if we don't, at the same level of engagement, also try to build a very strong and wide skills, how can I say, building. Okay, the data management, as I mentioned before, is, in my opinion, the most relevant wave of technology. Data management is a key asset for private sector, of course, especially for public sector, because it offers a huge set of opportunity. Data management might help policymakers and politicians to make decisions, to offer transparency, to analyze trends, to get insight, and also to have projections of something that is happening. But at the same time, data management should be an ally to develop services to citizens. But we have to collect the data in a proper way. We have to collect clear data to be used as knowledge. And we also have to engage people who know how to manage data. And so we have to make an effort to understand which are the needs of our data management. From a technical point of view, data should be clear, should be interoperable, should be real. And on the other side, we also have to engage more and more people with the right skills. And it's not easy within the public sector. Let me give you a couple of examples. In Italy, we are working on the National Recovery and Resilience Plan based on European Union funds. It's a huge effort. It's a huge plan based on mainly 3 pillars: digitalization and innovation, ecological transition, social inclusion. There are hundreds of projects. There is not one single project connected to this plan that can be successful without a high level and professional usage of data. And so every day, in every single stream, we have to face this issue: how we can work on data, how we can make data interoperable, how we can make all the different public administration and also the private sector on the same line. I give you another example from my previous role. When I was deputy mayor, at the very beginning of my mandate, I was a tech, so I had in mind the first project I wanted to launch was an interoperability project. And everyone told me that the municipality of Milan was one of the best in innovation, blah, blah, blah. I made an assessment and we had 282 different databases built for not being interoperable, built to be the power of different departments. So the first project that we began before any idea of developing services was one by one, we had to build a data lake, a huge data lake that for us was the main source of getting data and develop services. But the first 2 years were totally focused on building the data lake that we called Smart Lake, because we have to normalize data. I don't want to be too technical, but we had a huge work on data in order to have a real valuable data source. One of the best projects that then we developed was the Citizen Digital Folder, which is growing every month, and I'm so happy that they are still working on that, which is a single point with every single citizen might find all the information and the data coming from the registry office, the education department, the mobility department. So everyone easily from their mobile phone can get details of family unit, registration to school services, enrollment to schools, appointments to offices, also local taxes, and so on. This is something very similar to what the Italian government has recently launched, because they launched the first public cloud for all the information on the registry offices from the different municipality. It's exactly the same path. So assessment, working on data, clear a big work, a big effort on cleaning data, and then make the data useful for becoming knowledge and then services. The last part of my initial speech as another topic, which is, okay, we know, all of us, we know that public sector should work on data, that we have to work together with the private sector, because if we like it or we don't like it, there are hundreds of companies collecting our data. So we, from our point of view, from the public sector point of view, we have to manage this new, era. At the same time, there is also the topic around privacy and security, because from the public sector perspective, we have to respect privacy and we have to reassure citizens about their security of our data management. There are different perspectives on these topics. My personal opinion is that we definitely need to work together to the private sector to define rules, to understand opportunities and threats, and especially we have to define rules that are across borders, because there is no way to be successful if we only have in the internet era, if we only look at our own city or own country. For example, the GDPR is a very, very positive aspect that in Europe was developed. I know from my private previous role and from my public previous law that it was not easy to make GDPR, on our project, but it was something. And the last things I want to share with you was a couple of years ago, some cities tried to do something together in order to face digital rights of citizens. And I am very proud that Milano was one of the first cities, together with Amsterdam, Barcelona, and New York, to constitute this Cities Coalition for Digital Rights, which are still working together to face the most common issues and help each other to overcome the same project. We need to use data, but at the same time, we need to respect citizens' rights. And this is also a key lever for gaining trust from citizens. We are public sector, we are the institution, we have to develop the best possible services based on technology, but we have to respect citizens' rights. So I don't want to get too much time. I really hope this was useful. I do not have a solution, but I'm very interested in debating with you these topics. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Roberta, for this excellent introduction. I very much enjoyed the examples from cities. We have, I think, a lot to learn from cities when it comes to data management and user centricity as well. I've seen there are some questions in the chat. We'll take those questions a bit later after session 1, when we have a dedicated Q&A session. And now, in the meantime, I would like to continue and give the floor to my colleague Nathan Carvalho, who is a research associate at the Lisbon Council. Nathan will present user centricity, interoperability, and citizens' data sovereignty, the foundations of cross-border digital public services, a policy brief that he co-authored together with 2 more colleagues at the Lisbon Council who are also present here, David Osmo and Grace Milner. The policy brief is launching today as part of the Across project, a Horizon 2025 funded project that aims to build a solution that will aid public authorities and the private sector in implementing user-centric, interoperable, and privacy-enhancing services. So Nathan, the floor is yours. I believe you also have a presentation.
Hello, hello. Can you all hear me and see my screen? Is it possible to see my screen? Yes. Okay.
We don't see we see also your PowerPoint. So if you can make it in presenter. Yes, that's better.
Okay, thank you, Krisha, for the introduction. As Krisha mentioned, this is a policy brief that I wrote together with Grace and David. They are here today, my colleagues. And this is also a policy brief that we wrote on behalf of the Across project that we are also a part on as partners. The Across project deals with cross-border services, and this is what the policy brief is about: how to improve cross-border services in the European Union. And first, I would like to mention why these type of services are important to begin with. And we have first an economic aspect, and there are a lot of research that deals and touch on this topic. But I would just like to mention one source, and that is that for every 1% decrease that we have for cross-border services, the proportion of cross-border services, that will cost the EU roughly 8 billion euros. And that's because it's with cross-border services that people can travel, work, and study in other EU countries. So that cross-border services, they make the economy of the EU spin. There's also a social aspect of cross-border services, and that is if you ask a EU national what is the personification of the EU in their minds, the answer will be most likely the free movement that they have to travel, work, or study between countries. And that is only possible, of course, when you have cross-border services. They have to be effective in order to operationalize this goal of free movement within the EU. But of course, there are some barriers to implement these services. And the first one that we come when we do some research here is that digital public services, that they are not yet user-centric enough. They are not so much focused on the user yet. The second barrier that we have is the insufficient progress on interoperability. There are many reports on the ISO 2 programming that can say that, and unfortunately, that are many advancements that we need to do in order for cross-border services to be more interoperable. The third main barrier that we can find is that citizens have many concerns to give their data to governments. So whenever they engage with online public services, they don't feel so safe to give their data. Of course, this also happens with the private sector, but it's also important to mention with the public services nonetheless. Also, there's some data here from the Eurostat. This is official data from the EU. When we take all the percentage of internet users on the EU, there is a very big gap between e-government and e-commerce users. So year by year, people are using more private services. They are buying more online. And when we compare that with e-government services, we can see that people are still not yet using as much public services as private ones. Of course, we cannot pinpoint this problem into only one thing, but we can of course mention the barriers here that I just said, and link those with this issue. And just to finalize this summary of this policy brief, I show you this image from the Across project, and the Across project is meant to overcome some of these barriers. So in Across, we do co-creation sessions with the citizens, and that is to ensure that we take the demands from the citizens when we create the Across platform. So we will know how a perfect, let's say, cross-border service would look like from the citizen perspective. So when building the Across platform, we take this into consideration. And the Across platform will also be compliant with the most recent EU regulations, and we will create a data governance framework. This framework is to ensure that the platform is privacy compliant. And finally, the Across platform will also connect with many public sector authorities and also with third-party private sector services. And that is to ensure that the platform is interoperable between these authorities and private business. We take this solution and we test it on 3 different countries. We have 3 pilots in Across, 1 in Greece, 1 in Germany, and 1 in Latvia. And these pilots, of course, are meant to test the platform, to see the problems that we have in the solution, and of course, to find, to enhance the platform as we test it. So this is just a summary of what we write about on the policy brief. You don't need to worry about it. We will send the policy brief to everyone that has registered here on the event. If you like the topic of cross-border services and how to enhance them, please read it. And if you have any questions about the policy brief, you can send me an email or to my colleagues, Grace and David. Thank you very much. And I take any questions that you might have during the Q&A session. Thank you. So just stop sharing my screen for the moment.
Thank you, Nathan, for this presentation. As Nathan said, the policy brief will be made available immediately after the roundtable. So now after this, I would like to move to the first session, which, as I already mentioned, we'll discuss the digital identity wallet and how it will enhance the user experience on digital public services. The session will be led by Professor Robert Creamer, and Mr. Herbert Leitold and Mr. Felipe Rodriguez will serve as discussants. I would like you all to unmute yourselves, and I would like to now introduce Professor Robert Creamer. Professor Robert Creamer is full professor of e-governance within the SKYTE Institute at the University of Tartu in Estonia. He is part of the mGov4EU project, one of the 5 projects that are represented today. The mGov4EU is a project that follows a citizen-centric approach to provide a bridge between eIDAS and the single digital gateway in order to enable mobile cross-government services for Europe. As a reminder, you can post your questions into the chat and we will be addressing those right after session 1. So, Professor Kramer, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me, and really it's a great pleasure to see so many familiar faces, that we are all concerned about actually making a digital single market happen here in Europe. And I think that's really the important element, that we're all working towards this, that at one point it's not important where we're located, but where we want to work, where we want to contribute, and where we want to add value. And this is our ultimate aim. We have also understood and basically learned over the years that one of the pillars for building such a market, such a ecosystem that actually allows us to do transactions, to use services online, is actually the eID. Yeah, so being able to, on the one hand side, identify and authenticate a citizen, and so basically combining the physical person with the digital person, so to actually match those identities, and then also be able to commit that person to a contract, meaning being able to do an electronic signature. So those are actually functions that, to be honest, nobody cares about. The only thing they do is they want to be able to use a service, but they don't care how they can make use of that service. So in a way, in order to actually make that enabler of digital service happen, we first need to get the citizens to accept that technology. So we need to build their digital mindset. That means that they are actually understanding how does the technology work and actually lose their fear. And how do they actually learn about that? On the one hand side, really by playing around, hopefully as a kid. And then when they are grown up, actually are able to keep them interesting, meaning high impact applications that actually make them experience the technology. And then on the other hand, actually provide them with useful ones that actually make them high frequently using them. So by actually having those two sets of applications, it allows us to have feedback loops and actually make this infrastructure, this enabler, actually opening up the digital world for actual transactions. So in order to make that happen on a national level, it's the same thing also to make that happen on a cross-border level. It basically needs to have some interesting applications. Maybe the European Citizen Initiative, so meaning an application around democracy, might be this focused application that works cross-border, could be one that we would make enabled with the eID and actually could drive people to experience for the first time such a cross-border application. But then when it comes to this useful cross-border application, then I think we need to really think a bit further. And here is actually what the mGov project is trying to explore, really to have that use case from the single digital gateway regulation, from this Article 14, once only technical system that enable things like registering your address or actually registering an employment in another country. Actually, that might be something that will drive the usage, and hopefully we'll find also the high frequent one. But in order to make that happen, we also need to understand that there are some actual challenges that we need to overcome, and that's really around the identity and record matching problem. For one of those that really the use of the digital wallet could help us actually overcome and actually finally bring together the 3 different identities that I have, for example, or digital identities that I have in 3 different member states of the European Union, so that we're able to combine them together and actually provide one electronic identity. And here are my big hopes for the digital wallet, and I'm looking forward for the excellent discussions from colleagues such as Herbert and Felipe, and see what they have to say in my, to challenge me a bit. Thank you.
Hopefully they will, Professor Kerman. Yes, with that, I would like to give now the floor to the first discussion in this session, Mr. Herbert Leithold, who is the Secretary General of ACIT, the Secure Information Technology Center of Austria. He's also a board member of the nonprofit foundation Stiftung Secure Information and Communication Technologies. And he's also part of the MGov for EU consortium, which I just presented a little bit earlier. So, Mr. Lytle, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the nice introduction. And I also want to extend, aside being a member of the MGov4EU consortium, I also happen to work in the EIDAS field as member of the cooperation network and also working on the EU Digital Wallet Toolbox process. So in my few minutes, I would first love to share a few thoughts on the EU Wallet initiative as a whole, where I think the Commission proposal is very ambitious and just right in time, and it can be a game changer in terms of enabling a digital service market, as it has some pretty nice aspects, like EIDA so far, not by design, but in fact had a focus on public services. And there was an excellent comment by Mr. Bukowski in comparing e-commerce and e-government, in particular when we saw the gap in usage. I mean, I'm using an e-government service twice a year. How often do I log in into a bank? So having an EID that just focuses on the public sector is just half of the story. Because what does it help me if I can use the EID to open a business in another country? And for opening a bank account, I need to go there. So that wouldn't help a lot. So the additional focus on also private services in the EIDAS revision can help a lot. But also that it has a mobile device focus. If you ever happen to use EIDAS 1, that is traditional PC based. The whole process, the user experience. And I'm just happen to sit on my PC as I'm in the office, but 5 minutes after that session is over, I'm on the road, I'm using my mobile. And as soon as I use the mobile, I need a few bit different paradigms in mobile services. Like I need to make massive use of once only, because filling in forms doesn't work on the mobile quite well. So that is one of the aspects that come with the EU DI wallet. A further comment earlier in the chat was, do we also talk e-health services? And in fact, in the EU DI wallet use cases, we do. We talk internet banking, public services, e-health, private sector services, gatekeepers under the Digital Services Act, so meaning the Googles, Facebooks, and so forth. And having a tool to authenticate with those services gives a huge challenge. Even though, and Robert, for instance, mentioned identity matching, that you pretty much need in public services, like to make sure that just you enter the DEX account. If you happen to follow the public consultations on the EIDAS revision in the European Parliament, in particular that aspect, unique persistent identifiers and identity matching, the European Parliament rightly pointed to the challenges you have there on with respect to privacy. And even if you get it technically right, and even if the revision wasn't meant to use a unique persistent identifier also in private services, it is the user perception, the citizen perception that counts. So if you have a tool that opens you to or that enables you for cross-border services in all those areas, private sector, gaming, for instance, and so forth, you need to get the privacy aspect technically right, but also the user perception. And Robert already mentioned also the single digit gateway regulation, the once only technical system, which from the history, also not by design, but how it is implemented also has a bit of a PC based focus. And that is where the MGov4EU project comes in, where EID, secure identification, is a key basic function to enable SDGR. But on the other hand, to be future-proof with all those services, you need to get that things on the mobile. So the massive use of once only and EID, if you don't manage that you can use your tablet, your mobile phone to use that, we are not seeing the signals of how citizens currently use the internet, which mainly is through mobile devices. So that's it for my 3 to 4 minutes to put a few thoughts on that, and I'm happy to, and I'm looking forward to the discussion on all those aspects.
Thank you, Mr. Teitl, and thank you also for addressing the chat as well. So I would like to now invite our second discussion, Filipe Rodrigues. Filipe is a research and innovation manager at the Portuguese Criminal Police. He's also part of the GLASS project, a project that aims at creating a new paradigm for the sharing and transfer of personal information with the citizen in control. So Filipe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today here with this great panel. So I'm representing the GLASS project, an Horizon 2020 funded project where we are aiming to develop a single sign-on wallet as a service platform, aiming at interconnecting distinct distributed apps for responsible ID authentication, document sharing, information exchange, and also transactions validation. Our main goal with this project is to make either public administrations and public institutions more open, efficient, and inclusive, as the other projects that are here represented. Of course, providing borderless, digital, personalized, and citizen-driven public services for all the EU population. This is a quite interesting project composed by a consortium of 14 entities, where 3 main end users are involved. So the Ministry of Justice from Portugal, which I'm representing, the Hellenic Ministry of Digital Governance, and also a municipality from a non-EU country, the Istanbul municipality. With the project, we are studying 3 main use cases, which I think can reflect in a very good manner the advantages and what will be the enhancements to the users with this type of technologies in the future. So the movement of citizens across the EU, so to move from a EU country to another one, visiting a non-EU country for a EU citizen, and also recruitment processes. So for people from non-EU countries to move to work in an EU country. So these are the 3 main use cases we are studying in the project. And answering directly to the question made to this session, so how it will enhance the user experience. So with our wallet and the solutions we are developing in GLASS, this entire ecosystem, of course, through the use of this digital identity wallet by itself, it will simplify the access and processing of all digital public services, will reduce the exhausting bureaucratic procedures, as already mentioned before. So we'll ensure that users will have quicker, reliable, and less costly access to public services. And of course, this fast transmission and sharing of users' identity in the most prompt manner will, of course, save time to the users, then enhancing their satisfaction using this type of services. Of course, we cannot forget the data ownership and control. So we are paying much attention to that in what we are developing on GLASS. So making sure that all the data is fully owned by the user and it's only shared when citizens decide what information should be shared with whom and when. So this is a principle that we are not, that we are considering very strongly. And of course, we are following the principle of only as needed, so to ensure the most privacy of the data that we can with the environment we are developing. Finally, and not to spend much time with details, so I would like to stress 4 main aspects that we are taking into account, more from a technical perspective, that we believe that these must be across main aspects for all these type of initiatives and projects. So the first one is interoperability, which others already spoke about it today. So we must comply with international standards, cooperate with different countries in the ecosystems, so we can enable this cooperation. Another thing, it's the allowance for third-party integration. So we also are foreseeing this on GLASS. So to have the integration also from the private sector and from the business side entities from the EU, so we can have a most robust and complete system overall, and giving to the user more options and more applications in the end. Data privacy, so we must comply with different countries' regulations, and in the GLASS project we have this great challenge because we are dealing with EU countries and also non-EU countries, Turkey, so we are ensuring the compliance between GDPR and KVKK from Turkey. Also, the data control, it's very, very important for this matter. So all personal data and documents are only accessed and controlled by the owner, and occasionally external stakeholders might have access to them with prior authorization from the citizens. So this is critical for citizens to believe in the technologies and to make use of this type of systems. And finally, security, which of course, it's a very relevant point for citizens to trust the technology. We must show to them that they are using something that is secure. That's why we are using distributed apps with no single point of failure in our architecture. And also we are using distributed ledger systems so we can make sure that all these aspects are compliant within our ecosystem and within the system we are trying to develop. And with this, I end up my speech for today. I would like to thank for the opportunity to represent here GLASS project, and I'm glad to see other projects that are also working on this domain, and we are happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Filippo. Thank you. So I would like to move to questions now. And first I would like to go to Mr. Eric Brouwer. I believe your microphone is already on. If you'd like to pose your question, I would like to ask you first to introduce yourself.
Okay, now is my mic on, and I think my camera also.
Yes, we can hear you and I can see you.
Is it? Can you hear me, yes?
Yes, yes.
Okay, it was about the first introduction about the developments in Italy, that I was wondering whether citizens now can even use a wallet to look at their own data and download the data from different sources from the government and then use it in public services or private services. Is that already operational, or is it just an ID like SSE and other things?
Thank you. I believe this is a question for Roberta. Roberta,
yeah, for Roberta,
let me take another. Oh, okay. Please, you can go on and answer now.
As you want. So as you want.
No, it's okay. Yeah, please go on.
Okay. Thanks for the question. I read it on the chat. No, it is operational. It is operational already, but it's an interoperable platform which is connected to different data sources, especially for registry office documents. So you have your where you live, the components of your family, all the documents that usually people go to ask to the registry office. Someone else asked about the health. Health is not national yet. There are very, very good examples region by region. For example, Region Emilia-Romagna or Lombardy region is already very up to date. There is not yet a unique and national health interoperable platform. We are working on this, and we are also working on a folder, an health folder that every single citizen might consider and interrogate, but it is not yet at national level. The registry office is at national level and it is working.
Thank you. Thank you, Roberta. Next, I would like to go to Mr. Michał Bukowski. If you can first introduce yourself and then pose your question, please.
Hello, my name is Michał Bukowski. I work for the Polish Chancellery of the Prime Minister. And I've got a question to Felipe. I don't know the details of your project, but I would like to address such an issue. How do you educate citizens with whom they should share their data, especially in the international environment? So how you address the risk of a scam? So people decide with whom to share data, but how they know with whom they should share this data?
Thank you for the question. I think there's no a single answer to that precise question. I think the government has the responsibility also to teach their citizens on when can they trust a certain entity, when is it valuable to share their data with, and I think this must come with time. So I think that younger generations will be much more ready to get to know when their data must be shared. But of course, this is not a straightforward point. We have different people from different cultures, and sometimes it's not easy to know when to trust or not to trust. But I think it comes from education, training of the citizens, widespreading information on tentative scams that are occurring. From my personal example, so working at the criminal police, we usually share a lot of information on new scams and new types of digital crimes that are occurring for, let's say, for stealing money, for stealing information of persons, etc. So I think this is a governmental responsibility, and in the end, this type of campaigns, sharing of information, sharing of guidelines on how to use the technologies, it can enhance a lot the overall knowledge of a citizen that can make use of these new digitalized e-government services.
Okay, thank you for response.
You're welcome.
I think with that we can close session 1 and move into session 2, which will explore the theme of co-creation for data sovereignty. How can governments boost citizen trust? The first speaker in this session is Enrique Areziaga, who is the Chief Digital Officer of Tecnalia, the largest center for applied research and technological development in Spain. Enrique is also the CEO and co-founder of GPON Doctor, a spin-off company of Tecnalia, specializing in fiber-to-home networks, if I'm not mistaken, Enrique. So Enrique is also part of the Across Project Consortium, and we're delighted that you're here with us. The floor is yours.
So, hello, everyone. Well, I don't know if you can share my slides, please. Yeah, well, so thanks for the introductions, and I'm very glad just to try to share a little bit of the findings that we have been doing with the project, and also I would like also just to thank Roberta. I mean, while I am being in the fiber to the home ecosystem, I've also been engaged with the deployment of fiber in Milan, which was one of the first cities in the world that they have so they are always on advanced from maybe the rest of the, at least at the European level, from my perspective. So it's a great task. So it's so today, in fact, I will try to introduce a little bit one of the concerns, especially from the citizens when we talk about trust, about how the data is used. Well, could you please go to the next slide, please? Okay, so that's so as you have already mentioned, we are part of the Across project. My colleague Timo is also contributing to this panel, so probably he will with more feedback from what we are doing here. But first, for the introduction, I would like just to share whenever we just interview people, I was saying what they feel about the data, what they feel when they are with the personal data, what is being done, and they are always saying like, they're a little bit of desperation. They say, okay, when data out is out. Okay, so like I always just don't have any much control of when my data is out. And so the problem there, I mean, is they are all concerned about all this business that is time behind when they are using the personal data. With this company that what they say there's this harvesting data, because later on they use it to do this personal like advertising, like maybe that's Google or the big technical companies. So because they make money out of it, they provide something for free, like for example the search engine like Google, but they will get something in return. They get you data. Okay, so that they track everything you do, and based on that they provide this data to all the companies that they just advertise things to you. So that's the way they make money. Okay, they can get a lot of information there, but there's still some data that is not public, which probably is like your personal, well, your email address or something, or more private, your phone number or whatever. But it looks like in some unregulated access to government certified identities, these companies, they also get the sensitive data that they do not have, like the legal names, for example. Okay, so at the end, there's a full market behind. Okay, and they are, well, they are using this data for business. The other part that is pretty much rising concern is, there's the United States Cloud Act that enabled the government in the United States to access to any data which is stored in the data centers located in the US territory. At this moment, or at least from the data that I have, more than 90% of the European data is stored and processed in US data centers. Okay, so there's a lot of concerns about how private my data is, or how I would say what is the sovereignty of my data, how I am the owner of my data and what they can do with the data. It is also true that the European Commission has reacts and regarding data sovereignty, and recently they have proposed the European Data Act, which was in February, and is supposed just to come into force in 2024. So it's still more than 1 year ahead just to have the enforced. Okay, and this will complement the GDPR. And one of the things they do is that even any devices that you have and they get data from you, it will be yours. I mean, if they will need to have permission to access to any data that you might even have at your house and collecting that. Okay, so this is a good way to go. But still, the sovereignty is. Could you please just go for the next slide? Sovereignty is at different levels. It's good when they say that. It's not about protectionism. It's not that we would like to protect the data and avoid that we can make business with the data, because we know that there are a lot of things that without data they can't do anything. Okay, but we will need to protect it. Okay, so please next slide. So that when we talk, we have regarding data, we have three things. So we have three states. The first one is the data in use, when we are using the data. The one is data in motion, when we are transmitting, so the communication is important here. And the rest is data at rest. So that is when the data is stored, either locally or in the cloud. When we are, most of the time when we are talking about data sovereignty, we only focus on data at rest. Okay, so that, we put it on the cloud, but we think, okay, the data is stored in a specific device, and it is in, it is in Europe or it is in US, but it's when we talk about data sovereignty, it's more than that. Okay, it's not only where it is stored, it is also how it's communicated. So if you, this is like I'm saying here, you need to answer to all these questions: who owns the data? Who can store my data? Who can data be stored? How can data be used? How can be protected? And what about the abuse of data? So that's a lot of questions. I will say that most of them we only focus when we are talking about the storage of the data. It is also good to know that the things can now be stored, and you can just provide only anonymous information so that they can be processed. So just by saying that I keep the data by myself, I'm not saying, I am not preventing other business just to applying artificial intelligence or any other learning to my data and later on provide me the results. Okay, and also another question here, it says, okay, we know that there is a lot of things being done for e-health, and there is a lot of privacy issues, sovereignty on the data at all levels, and it's more or less the same in Europe and in US, but it's not the case for the other data. So it's possible to be done. We know it's done. But I mean, there is something that we will need to do at the European level. And of course, those also be in line with the government's trust that it is part of the discussion here. We will need to boost the government trust if we assure the citizens that their data will only be used for the purposes of what they are intended to, and it will not further end up in any other company that they will make business out of them. So that's a little bit of this opening the discussion here. I guess that my colleague Timo will provide the solution from the cross-platform. Okay, this is a lot for the responsibility for you. And I also would like to align this with the previous talk about the UO wallet, because the UO wallet will not only be used for the identity, it will also be used to store personal data. Like, for example, it would talk about the credentials from the university with your academic records. You can store them in the wallet. I mean, and you are the owner of the data, and you decide to whom you will provide it. And also the communication between the wallet and the service, the government or whoever is there, or the university, it has also need to be secure. It has also need to be private. It's not only just having the privacy in the wallet, also the communication channel has also be private. Okay. So maybe I will open the other discussions of the other panelists just to provide the feedback. You can be completely against what I have said. So thanks for inviting me and give the floor to the other. I don't know, Timo or Judy. Okay.
Thank you, Enrique, for outlining the issue with such clarity. We'll go to Judy next. Judy Attard. Sorry, apologies. Judy Attard is Enterprise Data Manager at the Malta Information Technology Agency. Among other achievements, she has also helped draft Malta's national data strategy, and she represents the InGov project, a project that aims at developing and deploying a comprehensive, integrated public services holistic framework and ICT mobile tools that will support the co-creation and governance of those services. Judy, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, today we'll be talking to you a bit about the InGov project. So it's an H2020 funded project, and so the full name is Inclusive Governance Models and ICT Tools for Integrated Public Service Co-Creation and Provision. So basically, as you can see from the name itself, the motivation behind this project, there's a specific focus on the provision of integrated public services and their co-creation. And basically, this project is very much aligned with ongoing efforts towards the modernization of public services and making them more user-centric, hence the co-creation aspect. This project aims to enhance existing and devise new policies, methods, and ICT tools for the inclusive IPS co-creation provision. And it also aims to capitalize on existing and, well, mainly EU policies and initiatives, existing literature and practitioners' good practices. So basically, within this project, there are 4 pilots. These are aimed to implement the models and tools developed within the project. So there's an Austrian, a Greek, and a Croatian pilot, which are focusing on citizens as end users and as part of the co-creation process. And then there is the Maltese pilot, which Mita is working on. So the Maltese pilot is a bit special in that the co-creation aspect is focusing on public service providers as the IPS end users, as opposed to citizens, who in this case are the end beneficiaries of this integrated public service. So the goal of the Maltese pilot is to develop a household units register as an integrated public service. So there are different ways to represent household as used by the public administration. So there can be a family sharing a residence, or maybe a number of students renting an apartment. And there are a number of challenges to developing this household units register as an IPS. So there are a number of silos spread across different departments. There are non-interoperable systems and legacy systems. And there are also a number of entities having duplicated data, so this results in a number of inconsistencies. So our approach here is actually to create a representation layer on top of this data, on top of these data silos, basically, which would integrate the underlying data and provide a comprehensive representation of all this household data. So this household data would include both identity information of a person and their address records. So basically, I don't really have time to get into the technical details, but we are using a semantic-based approach and knowledge graphs to be able to integrate this data and provide this comprehensive view. But basically, to ensure the sustainability of this register, we are carrying out a strong co-creation approach and involving all relevant stakeholders. We are doing this co-creation approach throughout the IPS lifecycle. And in fact, one important outcome of this co-creation aspect is that we identified that there are indeed different definitions and different representations of household units, as I explained before. So there can be families or people renting a place. And these representations were also changing based on the domain where this data was used. So, for example, there were different definitions in the social security domain, in the taxation domain, and so on and so forth. And well, somewhat in line with Enrique's presentation, the biggest challenge we found here was that to ensure the we needed to ensure the establishment of the legal basis, since the data here is of a personal nature. So we did make sure that we are aligned with existing legislation, such as GDPR and other national legislation, and we needed to make sure that this data is protected throughout its life cycle, so throughout its use within this register. So our approach here can be considered quite similar to the one-only principle, in that we're integrating data while trying to make it more accurate and making it accessible from a single entry point. So public service providers will be able to access and use this register, and they will get a comprehensive view of the different households that a single person may belong to. So, for example, a student renting an apartment might be considered to form part of one household in terms of the rent. But in terms of social security, for example, the student might belong to a different household, for example, their own family. So this representation, this holistic representation and this register will help increase citizen trust in government, because we would be able to provide better public service delivery. For example, that citizens can actually receive expected benefits, and we can also go ahead to providing proactive public services. So to give you maybe a more concrete example on well, the motivation behind this project, really. Household data was used in the 2020 Maltese government budget, where the government needed to issue a bonus to Maltese households to cater for the increase in prices for milk and bread. And basically, due to the silos and the consistent data across, a high number of citizens did not receive this bonus. And a customer service complaint line was actually set up to rectify such issues. So this register will be able to contribute towards these issues and increase citizen satisfaction in the end. So through this approach, the goal of the Maltese pilot within the INGAF project is indeed to improve collaboration and trust between public entities and departments, and also the citizen-centered sense of Malta. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy, your point about co-creation, I think co-creation is a cornerstone for trust. When you involve citizens in designing services, and they trust government more and they trust the service more. Now I think the Timo Berman is next. I think Timo already, Enrique tasked you to finding the solutions to all this. Mr. Berman is a senior consultant at Dataport, a leading IT service provider for public administrations in Germany. He's joining us from Hamburg, and he's also a partner at Across Project. The floor is yours.
Hey, yo. Yeah, as you said, my name is Timo Berman. I'm speaking to you on behalf of Dataport from Hamburg in Germany, which is today, and I'm not used to it, trust me, sunny. So we do have nice weather. The summer is coming. I'm in the role of a consultant, for digital transformation of the public sector for Dataport. And right in the course in our project, which Enrique already introduced you to, I'm our project lead and also, which is quite interesting, then the German use case provider. Personally, I'm focusing on topics like the translation, but also the transfer of European regulations, as you know, the SDG, but also IDAS into the German digital ecosystem, and sure, the other way around. So the same applies to my, one of my favorite activities when it comes to building bridges, also between the public and the private sector, and looking at the utilization of digital identities. But I'm gonna come back to this topic later on. Thinking about our research and the Across project, just to get you on board and have you on the same page, we specifically looked at two scenarios.
I don't hear Timo. Timo, are you still with us? I think you have a problem with your connection.
Yeah, I think he's frozen.
Yeah.
So,
Timo, are you back on? I think your connection is a bit unstable. We haven't heard your last point. Now you're muted. Can you unmute? And maybe if you turn off your camera, it will be the connection will improve.
yeah, I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I turned off the camera. So let's go on. Looking at Across, or thinking about our project, we looked at working and studying about, and we allowed the participants to tell their story. So by evaluating those results, we also looked at the pain points, but we also try to stress the desire. So as you, and I'm seriously addressing all of you right now, if you imagine that you want to study abroad, maybe you can even close your eyes if you want, but feel free to imagine you want to study abroad. How do you feel when thinking about the organization of this live event, and what potential challenges do you see? So you want to study within the European Union, you're not sure maybe how to organize or where to start. Maybe you go to Google, but what do you do in which order? And this is what we wanted to find out and see, okay, where are the pain points in the past, but where is also the best possible and best imaginable solution for the future? And what we have learned in this is absolutely that we needed to accept that, mostly or almost nothing is as we have expected beforehand. So we needed to zoom out all the time by receiving feedback. And as Roberta in the very beginning said, especially the cross-border situation is quite different. So we do have a lot of different situations. Therefore, the communication is key in between of the countries. That's what we also experience in Across. Also, when it comes to bridging the gap between public and private sector. So we spoke about this beforehand. Those sectors are still a little bit distanced from another. That's why we need to underline this and look at it specifically. Thinking about challenges, we were also asked to look at our challenges. It was quite tricky to find the right target group. So appropriate people who were talking about their experience or who could imagine how the situation was when they moved abroad for working or studying. Also, and that's what the previous group was talking about, the feeling you have while logging into an official platform, what we try to do. So Across is aiming at providing a solution where you can log in, and we want to make users feel secure while using a solution like this, because you need to be sure that your data are safe, and you log in also via a legitimate version, maybe the national login option, the EID. And coming to my last question and my last short topic, the question how we can all, and I'm talking to you again, how we can all contribute to this. I can also support what Judy said. So we need to embrace involvement. So we need to take citizen also, but also public authorities on our journey. And maybe we can also recommend like using the EID and deliver like trustworthy systems, like systems where the people can put trust in, and really put something into practice, because we can talk about it, and it's great because communication is key, but we should try and fail maybe. So this is like our approach in the course as well, and that's what we try to aim at within the next month already. So thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Timo. So I see there are a lot of comments in the chat and questions. We'll take these after session 3 in the last Q&A sessions. So with that, I would like to introduce session 3, which is the last session in this roundtable, and we'll explore co-delivery, and in particular, democratizing co-production for sustainable public services. What are the legal and technical barriers to co-delivery? The first speaker in this session is Mr. Matteo Gerosa, who is Head of Project Management at Fondazione Bruno Kessel in Italy. He represents the Interlink project. This project's goal is to overcome the barriers preventing public administrations to efficiently share services in the digital single market. Mr. Gerosa, the floor is yours.
Okay, here I am. Hello. Let me share my screen. Thank you for the introduction. 1 second, here it is. No, probably this is I shared the right one, no?
It looks like it's the right one, but we preview the next, your notes and the next slide.
Okay, let me try again. This one should be fine, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes, perfect. So welcome everyone. As I said, I'm the Head of Project Management of Fondazione Bruno Kessler. I'm also the coordinator of the Interlink project, one of the project of the cluster that was mentioned today. So let's talk a little bit about co-delivery. So when we talk about democratizing public service, of course, there are quite some things that comes to our mind, like it can be understood in different manner. So of course, the recipients of service must be seen as the service provider's first priority. The implementation of measures to ensure the citizens' needs and values are recognized in public service provision. So also good relation between the public administration and the community. We talk about trust, we talk about data sovereignty and so on. But co-delivery takes democratization one step further, because citizens are not only considered as first priority service recipients or clients, but also co-designers and co-deliverers of services. So let's make an example. We have association in Trento, for example, that is organizing after-school activities for primary school children. So this is a grassroots initiative, for example. But how can we move from a grassroots initiative to a co-delivered official service? So there are a high number of these initiatives that lives and dies, and of course the sustainability is a big problem. So what are the barriers for these initiatives to become official services? Because we know that to become official services, these barriers needs to comply with the same standard of an official services. So inclusiveness of access, to verify identities of users, interoperability, and so on. So these are general barriers for democratizing public service co-delivery that we analyzed within the Interlink project. In particular, we carry out an analysis on more than 1,000 papers on co-delivery. And let's say there are many ways to categorize the barriers to co-delivery, but this is just one example for this presentation. So we have, of course, structural government factor. So the financial capacity, the technical capacity, of course, legal issue to co-delivery, and the government culture of the public administration. Then we have the attitude, of course, like the open or closed attitude or public official towards co-production, towards citizen participation. Even in Italy, we have parts and regions and cities where the attitude is very, very different, even in regions close to each other. We have the compatibility of public organization for co-production and citizen participation that can become a barrier if this is not the case. Of course, the involvement and awareness of citizens can become a barrier, especially in the case of ensuring fair access to all. And of course, we talked, Roberta Cocco first, and also others talked about the skills, the digital skill and capacity that are, let's say, a big barrier for citizen co-delivery. So how can we remove this barrier? So this is one example, but the example of Interlink. In our project, that is a bit different from the other projects in the cluster, is more about combining the advantages of two approaches that are the one coming from grassroots initiatives, let's say the citizen to citizen, that usually harness enthusiasm and flexibility of the citizen population with the legitimacy and accountability granted by top-down traditional government frameworks. And so we want to provide enabler, but not only technological enabler that we remove the most common barriers to co-production, both at the infrastructure level, technological level, and non-technological level. Let me make you an example, and then I let the floor to my other two colleagues. We talk about, Robert Creamer talked about EID, digital identity. So in Italy in particular, it's quite complex for a private company or a group or an NGO to use SPID, that is the Italian version of the digital identity. It's quite complex. There are formal convention, technical barriers, and so it's that's the reason why the majority of these initiatives use, for example, Google authentication, because it's much easier, much simpler. So how can Interlink support this? Of course, we can provide technological enabler, like an open source authentication tool that allow interface between OAuth 2.0 and SAN 2.0, that are the two protocols. We can provide standard installation and integration with the Open Web Service for SPID, for example. And most of all, for the non-technological, for the legal enabler, we can support the intermediary between national authority and local TSO companies, offering templates, documentation, consent form, and so on. So with this way, we want to lower the barriers. This is a practical example, especially for the digital identity and the use of SPID and EID. This is the goal of the project, but I think it goes in the right direction of allowing citizens and NGOs to use and to provide really electronic service instead of just grassroots initiatives. And I leave the floor. We have just two slides, one of which are my two colleagues. And this is the first for Marit, but I let you introduce her.
Of course, yes, it's a great pleasure to introduce Marit Hofslot, who is concept and project developer at the Future Internet Lab of WAG Technology Society, an Amsterdam-based foundation that operates at the intersection of science, technology, and the arts, focusing on technology as an instrument for social change. And she's also part of the Across project. Marit, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm speaking to you from Amsterdam, and like Timo, it is also surprisingly sunny here, so that's always excellent. And yeah, I am also part of the Across project, like Timo and Enrique from the previous session. And Timo already alluded to this, but I just want to reiterate sort of the context of Across. So Across is a research and innovation project that aims at moving across borders in Europe easier. Like now, when European citizens want to move to another European country, they have to undertake many steps to set up their new life and their new destination. And these steps can be really slow and confusing and often need to be done on paper in real life after waiting in long queues, and can even be interdependent. So, for example, if you want to find a job in Germany, you need to have a bank account in Germany. But to open a bank account, you need to have an address. And to rent an apartment, you need to have a job. So it's like a vicious cycle. So if all these services were more easily digitally accessible, this could be done a lot easier and faster. And yeah, so Across is now in, I think, the 15th month, something like that. And the first year of Across was largely dedicated to researching our context and our target group and defining the scope of our project. And during this process, I learned some important lessons when it comes to the legal and technical barriers to democratic co-delivery of sustainable public services. And so what I want to talk about is also a little bit of an answer to Lucy Kimball's question in the chat about how to acknowledge and mitigate exclusion and inclusion and diversity in the process of co-creation and the design of services. Because what I've seen is that, sort of the most fundamental questions that we ask ourselves at the moment are what is governed and who takes part in the process of governing the Across platform. And currently we're working towards like creating democratic co-creation of Across's governance together with the citizens and stakeholders. And to make this truly democratic, we obviously want to be exclusive and accommodate all citizens and stakeholders, even those who are less digitally literate or do not have the means and documentation that is often necessary for the use of these cross-border services. But as with many research and innovation projects, including Across, these we face a lot of feasibility constraints related to like budgets and deadlines, but also differences in cultures around Europe and languages and even governmental approaches from the different countries. So we have to make careful decisions that limit the scope of Across to sort of avoid trying to solve everything. And this allows us to focus on like specific issues to address. And a benefit of this is that we turn our attention toward addressing like certain fundamental gaps, which helps us to explore like the technological routes for sharing like personal data with cross-border services and managing your digital identity. But there's also an issue with these like constraints in the scope, because which I think is often like inherent to research and innovation projects, which is that we need to find like a target group, like a common denominator, to make the scope of the project more manageable, and to address these like fundamental gaps that I mentioned, like the facilitation of digital cross-border services, or like in general, like the creation of the single digital market. You need to have like a set target group and a set scope, which oftentimes leads us to only design for the most probable user, which ends up being the more privileged people. And this is an issue because it excludes people who do not have the means or the documentation, such as refugees, for example. I've been looking around, and like one of the sort of solutions to this, I think, is to design for the margins. And it is basically the idea that you choose your target group to be the most marginalized people, which then automatically also includes people within those margins. So if you design for the people who are like at the margins, then everyone within those margins are also included. But this makes like the project difficult because you design for people without documentation, for example, which makes the issue of sharing personal data and managing digital identity more complex. But if you can design for people without documentation and make them feel welcomed and accommodated, then you also design for everyone else. So, for example, the designing from the margins toolkit here by Bellwether is a good place to start. It's like focused on like education practitioners and other child-focused agencies, but it gives like specific objectives and mindsets and activities and resources. And I think that Across can also learn from this still a lot, but I think it's a great approach to ensure more democratic co-production of services for the digital single market. So that was it for me. I think Norwich is up next. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Noortje Hoevens is the next speaker. She's a researcher at the Roundtable University, focusing on the digitalization in the public sector. She's also part of the Interlink consortium. And Noortje, I'd like to ask you to respect the time limit so that we have a little bit time for questions as well.
Yeah, of course. I will try to keep it as short as possible. As you said, I'm also representing the Interlink project, same as Matteo, which, amongst many other things, aims to develop a new collaborative governance model, which is based on public-civic partnerships, meaning that governments and private actors, including citizens, share equal power and responsibility. So the actual idea behind this public-civic partnerships can be linked to democratic public service delivery. And from a co-production point of view, democratic public service delivery is often conceptualized as the extent to which people from different societal groups or backgrounds are included in co-production or participation projects. And it's clear if we talk about citizen participation and co-production, that there is an underlying connection with democracy. Also, like Matteo just said, maybe co-production is even one step further away. But we can also ask the question to ourselves, like, whether co-production is democratic in nature. And during the last couple of years, this topic actually received a lot of scientific attention, because you can ask yourself if these participation projects really are reached by all citizens, or only the middle class participants and those who have the least need for it. And are citizens with a lower socioeconomic status also able to participate in these projects, and can governments actively engage these citizens? And also the benefits of these participation projects, these co-production projects, are they fairly distributed among citizens? And I think the example that Marit just gave us shows that this remains a huge barrier. And in the scientific literature, we then refer to democratic quality. And the democratic quality of co-production process can be made more specific by certain concepts like equity and inclusion. And inclusion then refers to the possibility that everyone is affected by, or that depends on a co-produced service, actually has the possibility to also join this co-production endeavor. And it also relates to the concept of accessibility. So more the ability to attract people with a variety of viewpoints with the aim to achieve a fair representation of citizens. And this democratic quality will be hampered if large groups in society are restrained in their opportunities to participate. And this is often the case with co-production initiatives, especially digital initiatives. And these participation gaps become even larger if other more affluent groups are overrepresented. So it's not only that we're missing specific groups of people, it's also that one specific group of people are overrepresented. And resulting from this, that the participation levels might differ between different groups in society. And then also the benefits of this participation and co-production processes are not always evenly and fairly distributed. And I also wanted to say something about impact and empowerment, but considering the time, I might just skip that and say that the co-production quality, or the democratic quality of co-production, can depend on the extent to which people in this project leads to equity, inclusion, and also impact and empowerment. And there are certain aspects that we need to give more attention to if we really want to accomplish this. And first, there seems to be a need for sufficient and truthful professional support from professionals in public or private organizations. And second, there's a need for a minimal level of competency of co-producing citizens, especially in this digital era that we're now in. And we can establish this through providing knowledge and resources. But this also has to do more with a more personal aspect in their self-confidence and their belief in their own competences. And third, it's really important that the salience of the task that is provided, that it's really clear to citizens. So it's clear for them, like, why are we co-producing? So there has to be an internal need for them to actually contribute. And I think the main lesson is that we are still in need on, we need more research that focuses on the question of whether co-production is democratic in nature, and also focusing on the co-production quality and the democratic quality, because we do not have enough empirical support for this. But based on the empirical examples that we know, it might be a barrier. And if co-production is considered as a solution to give people fair and equal access to basic services like education, safety, healthcare, then these assumptions cannot remain untested. So that's what I would like to conclude with.
Thank you, Norci. I think we are in time. We'll have time maybe to take only one question, and that's a question to Matteo from Mr. Bukowski, who I think is no longer with us. Is Mr. Bukowski still in the meeting?
Yes, he is. He's ready.
Yes, I'm present.
Oh, perfect. Sure. You can pose your question directly to Matteo.
Thank you very much. Matteo, very interesting presentation, but could you elaborate a little more about what do you mean by the co-delivery of services? I understand that the concept of the co-creation, so we involve the citizens or the recipients of the services in every stage of the creation, but what do you mean by the co-delivery?
Yeah, this is quite interesting because we, at the beginning of the project, we needed to have a kind of work to define the terms that are intended and meant differently in depending on the field of research you are. So with co-delivery, we mean when a service is delivered by a partnership of citizen and public administration in its delivery. For example, let me give a couple of examples of what we are doing. For example, let's suppose that you have not an online service, but a physical service. But a physical service for which still you need, for example, to log in with the IDAS to access this service, like, for example, as I say, after school for children. So, of course, you can have the public administration, it has its teacher, has its official, let's say, schools and so on, and provides after school, for example. Or even, for example, as a service moving, if we go into social care, elderlies that are not, let's say, autonomous in the city, for example. We have service like that provided by the public administration. On the other hand, we have, let's say, NGOs that do this kind of services, let's say, okay, but they are not official services. Maybe there is an NGO that sometimes provide after school for children or move people in the city. However, these initiatives are sometimes short-lived because there is a problem of sustainability, of legitimacy, of accessibility. How you ensure that its access to this service is fair? So there are a lot of questions. So what if we can merge the two? What if we can have a service that is delivered by an association with the let's say, monitoring of the public administration that ensure that this service complies with all what I'm saying. So this is the case of a physical. We have another example, for example, in Latvia, of an online service. So let's suppose that you have an online service that the citizen has to fill in. Sometimes what happens that an elderly citizen goes to a public office and asks the public official, okay, help me in filling this informally, because maybe formally the public official couldn't even see the data of the elderly, you know, because it's private data. So what if we can have an official helping service that online help elderlies in filling out online forms and so on. So this is our kind of, the idea is delivery. So it's not only, of course, it's important that the service is co-created, co-designed, because, but what I mean is the delivery of the service.
Okay, thank you very much for explanation.
Thank you, Matteo. And I think here we have to close the meeting. I would like to thank everyone, all the speakers, especially also to Roberta and Nathan in the first session, and everyone else for sharing your wisdom so generously. I think we have discussed solutions and we have touched upon them very much, and we look forward to more discussions in the future. So thank you all very much. A digital applause from me for everyone. And yes, of course, join me in congratulating all the speakers. Thank you very much.